What is the best knife steel for everyday carry? This can be a question that you have when you start researching what knife fits best for you and the situation that you are currently in. The problem is most of this information out there is highly dense, and if you're not careful, might put you to sleep. How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny, and today we're doing another episode of Steel Snobs. Backed by popular demand, we're going to talk about the steel that I consider to be the best knife steel for EDC. I am, of course, talking about S90V. Let's talk about why. In order to understand just how sublime S90V is, we have to start with talking about its history. Much like its predecessor M390, S90V was created for the plastics industry by Crucible. This came about in 1995. The goal was per usual: improve edge retention and maintain corrosion resistance. At the time, known initially as the powder metallurgy steel CPM 420V, S90V was meant to directly replace CPM 440V, now what we know as S60V. They accomplished this by reducing chromium amounts to 14% and raising vanadium amounts to 9%, which is both lower and higher than its predecessor super steels. Knife maker and journalist Phil Wilson actually wrote 2 articles on this fascinating new super steel in 1996, then a follow-up in 1998 when he began making knives and testing this steel. At the time, he was one of the few and primary users of S90V in knife making. He was limited by his technology for the time, and because his furnace was only capable of reaching about 2,000 degrees, his heat treats were rather low by today's standards, coming in at 56 to 58 HRC. Typically here in 2023, S90V is commonly heat treated to 59 to 62, resulting in much better edge retention. During his initial tests using fillet knives of S90V, he reported filleting about 22 albacore tuna without needing to resharpen the knives. He also reported no corrosion to the blades at this time, with S90V being a martensitic stainless steel. His testing didn't end there though, as he reported loaning the knives to a local rabbi who processed about 1,000 chickens per day. The rabbi himself reported using the knives every day for an entire week while processing the chickens without the knives becoming dull. 2 years later, in the year 2000, many notable custom knife makers began to use S90V, which included the likes of Brian Ty, Greg Lightfoot, Roger Gamble, with production knives being made in this steel coming from Microtech during the middle of the year. The truth is that there aren't many steels that have as good of edge retention as S90V when the proper heat treat protocols are being followed. For example, despite M390 being touted as a knife steel with amazing edge retention, S90V is far better for the wear resistance, with local expert and metallurgist Dr. Laren Thomas rating M390 at a 6.5, while S90V holds strong at a rating of 10. Keep in mind, the higher the number, the better the rating. Now, with that being said, I know there's some people hanging out in the peanut gallery screaming things like, what about M398? What about MagnaCut? What about Maximit? In case these steels are burning a competitive hole inside your brain, here's how the other steels stack up against S90V. While Maximit is an incredible steel for edge retention and is rated marginally higher than S90V in that category, S90V outshines Maximit in both toughness and corrosion resistance by healthy amounts. If you're having a hard time believing just how much toughness you sacrifice with Maximit for the sake of edge retention, head on over to Reddit and check out some of the posts from people complaining about their Spyderco Maximit knives shattering when dropped from marginally low distances. Moving on to M398. M398 is perhaps one of the toughest competitors for S90V, given that they are rated the same for edge retention, and While M398 does slightly outshine S90V in corrosion resistance, S90V actually has higher toughness by a stronger margin. It's at this time that I'd like to point out the diminishing returns one would see between these two steels in corrosion resistance, which is not seen in real life environments when it comes to toughness. The trade-off is a good one, and at worst we could call it a draw, and at best I believe most people would be willing to sacrifice a tiny bit of corrosion resistance for much better toughness when it comes to practical use case scenarios. And finally, MagnaCut. MagnaCut is an extremely attractive option because of how well rounded it is. You get decent edge retention, decent corrosion resistance, and acceptable toughness. That said, MagnaCut has to be heat treated above 62 HRC to really allow the edge retention to shine, and even at that point there's no guarantee that it'll still outperform S90V in that category. Dr. Larrin Thomas's knife steel rating is based on what is currently accepted in knife steel hardness today, and is based off an HRC of 60 to 62. It's at this level that it's not even close to the edge retention category, and while it does outshine S90V substantially in toughness, it is only marginally more effective at corrosion resistance. Hey guys, just wanted to take a quick minute to say thank you. If you're enjoying the content up to this point, go ahead and consider hitting the subscribe button. We're on the path to 100,000 subscribers, and we can't do it without you. So if you want to make sure to be notified every single time that I upload new content, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to check off that notification bell. Back to the content. While MagnaCut is potentially a better all-around steel, however, the requirement for higher than normal HRC to get the most out of this steel is a big detractor until the knife makers and manufacturers adjust to the necessity for higher HRC. Meanwhile, S90V, having been around for about 27 years, gives it the edge here because the protocols for heat treat have been perfected given its longer lifespan, and manufacturers have adjusted accordingly to the heat treat more consistently during this time. At this point in time, you might be saying to yourself, well, Rollshambo, that sounds good and great and everything, but what knives can I buy that have S90 blade steel? The good news is that you can find knives made with S90V at almost every single major knife retailer on the planet. You can also find S90V in knives made by Kaiser, by Kubi, benchmade, Spyderco, just to name a few. In fact, if you're interested in checking out some knives made in this blade steel, I'll make sure to link them in the description down below. It means a lot when you use those links because they are affiliate links, and I do get a little kickback when you decide to buy a knife using one of those links. You don't have to, but it definitely makes a difference, and it means a lot to continue making awesome content like this. So if you would be so kind, go ahead and check the links down below and see if there's a knife made in S90V that makes sense for you and your current situation. I've just thrown a ton of information your way, and in case you're wondering, there is in fact no knife steel that has a rating of 10 across the board. It just doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because anytime you have a knife steel with higher edge retention, it typically results in a knife steel with lower toughness. Corrosion resistance can also fluctuate up and down when messing with the different chromium and vanadium levels, as well as the levels of the other substances used to make these knife steels. One thing I want to make sure is perfectly clear is that there's a lot of information out there, and how you disseminate it is 100% up to you. With that being said, the information that I've given in this video so far is provided mostly in part to knife steel nerds. That's Dr. Larrin Thomas's metallurgy website, where he goes in depth about these knife steels. So if you're interested in learning more, or maybe you want something more than a cursory explanation of what these steels are made of and what they're capable of, I'll make sure to link his website down below as well. With that said, I do have some questions. For example, I'm hard pressed to find a more consistent option for everyday carry purposes than S90V, and I'm kind of shocked that despite its vastly outperforming steels like M390, S90V continues to be less popular amongst the knife community. Is this because of marketing? Does it cost more to obtain other super steels? Or are we as a demographic just too uninformed to know that S90V is in fact the steel we should have been asking for all along? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section down below. And if you want to watch more Steel Snob content, or if you want to check out some knife reviews, make sure to click on the video that pops up next.